26 years ago, when I joined the police service, I remember all my older colleagues and experienced and wise colleagues sitting around the table one day saying, it's not like it used to be. Jobs changed. Things were so much better in the old days. Why do they keep changing everything? If it ain't broke, don't fix it. They were the things that people used to say. The reason I tell you that is to outline that police reform isn't new. Police reform has been happening since 1829, when the police service was first formed. And the service has continually got to change because society changes. We police society. So, of course, the police has to change. But what policing hasn't experienced before is the sheer pace and the scale of the reform that it's undergoing at the present time. Some of this is a result of the economic climate that the country finds itself in, and some is the desire of the coalition government to reform what people have called the last unreformed public service. Well, my association, the Superintendents Association, would strongly dispute that assertion, and indeed only recently both the Prime Minister and the Home Secretary have referred to this country's police service as being the best in the world. I'm not here to argue for or against police reform. However, we have to ensure that the urgency of progressing the current police reform programme doesn't lead to unintended consequences that might have a negative impact on that excellent reputation. So what does the current police reform programme involve? Well, of course, reform isn't unique to the police service at the present time. The whole of the public sector is facing reform at different levels to deal with the consequences of the current comprehensive spending review period. And it's these cuts that provide the first challenge to the police service, and that's to deal with the impact of a budget that's reducing by approximately 20% over a 4-year period. And with staff costs accounting for 80% of that budget, this is obviously leading to losses in personnel, both police officers and police staff. Indeed, it's estimated that there will be 16,000 fewer police officers and 18,000 fewer police staff. That's a total of 34,000 fewer people delivering policing services by 2015. And if forces are going to continue to keep the public safe and to reduce crime with this level of resourcing, this won't be achieved by salami slicing the budget. Radical and transformational change is required. And there are examples of forces that are radically changing the way they do business, and you'll have heard about some of those already. But we have to bear in mind that all forces have not started from the same financial position, and there certainly isn't a one-size-fits-all solution. One of the consequences of the budget cuts is the increased collaboration between forces, which isn't necessarily a bad thing in itself. But our current 43 force structure and the fact that all forces are starting from the same position means that what we're seeing is a range of different collaboration models. Some forces are entering into a strategic alliance, some are collaborating with one or more other forces, and some with other parts of the public sector. And as you've already heard today, some forces, to varying extents, are collaborating with the private sector. The reality is the current 43 force model is not the most efficient for UK policing, particularly in the current economic environment. And without the political will to change this, we are creating a new substructure of policing that might just need to be unpicked in the future. Another major change for policing, and a central part of the current reform agenda for the police, is the introduction of elected police and crime commissioners in November this year to replace the existing police authorities. The Superintendents Association doesn't support the principle of police and crime commissioners. Our main concerns are the potential challenge to the operational independence of chief constables and the capability of one individual to effectively represent millions of people from different backgrounds and with different needs. Now the Act has been passed, however, we accept we must do what we can to make the role of PCCs work to ensure the public are adequately protected from harm. And of course, not only will police authorities have disappeared by the end of 2012, but we're losing the National Policing Improvement Agency, which has worked closely with the service in many ways in recent years, including setting promotion standards and designing and delivering training and development of leaders within the service. And by 2013, we'll have a number of new national policing bodies, including the National Crime Agency, and a new company to manage the procurement and development of police IT services. And then, of course, we will have a new professional body for policing, something which the service has no previous experience of. This body will operate in the public interest, and its range of responsibilities is yet to be defined, but it's clear there's a lot of work to do in the next 10 months to ensure that the body is able to deliver the required support and standards for the service by the time it starts in December of this year. What I've described so far is a huge amount of organisational change for the police service to deal with. And as if this wasn't enough, the whole issue of pay and conditions of officers and staff is under review by Tom Windsor. In addition to the changes to pensions and the 2-year pay freeze and pay cap that the rest of the public sector is facing, the first part of the Windsor review has already led to short-term changes to basic pay and allowances, which has left many officers and staff worse off. And there are likely to be significant recommendations in relation to the whole structure of police pay in the next part of the review due to be published shortly, along with proposals in relation to direct entry into the service and changes to pay negotiating arrangements. These are major issues for the police service. The culmination of so much change means that some members of the service understandably feel that they are under siege, but it's essential the service doesn't become too introspective. Every police officer and member of police staff I know has joined the police because they want to provide a service to the public and make a positive difference. That must remain our focus throughout these challenging times. So what about the future then? Well, as an association, we don't agree with all the reform that police service is facing, and we'll continue to speak out and give our professional view where this is the case and where we feel it's appropriate to do so. But our role as senior operational leaders in the police service is to be clear about our purpose and to lead the service through this reform whilst maintaining a focus on providing the best possible policing service to the public. So how do we do this? Well, firstly, we need to be clear about our purpose. The Home Secretary has stated the core role of the police is to cut crime, but we can't ignore the wider remit of protecting the public from harm and risk. A clear understanding of the police, the purpose of the police, is still lacking between the public, the police and the government. We need clarity about what success looks like, not just for the government, but for the public. And we already know that the public are concerned about much more than just crime figures. And of course, the role of protecting the public doesn't just apply to the police. It's the responsibility of most, if not all, of the agencies represented here in this room. And if there was ever a time for public services to work together in a more joined-up approach for the benefit of the public, then this has to be it. The whole of the public sector is facing financial difficult decisions that will impact on how our future services will be delivered. But if all we do is keep putting sticking plasters on society's problems, we will all fail in our task. This is not the time for any of us to retreat into silos, but the time to raise our game and work together even more effectively, whether that means sharing information better, pooling resources, or joining up technology. The reality is we all want the same outcome, a safer society for everyone. And there are some great examples of how this can be achieved on show at this conference. But the examples we're seeing result predominantly from practitioners working together to achieve a common goal at a local level. What I feel is lacking is evidence of a similarly joined-up approach across government. We need joined-up thinking and joined-up resources, with an understanding that we have to invest in longer-term solutions if we're going to have a long-term impact. If we're going to reduce the demand for all public services in the future and enable our reducing resources to be focused in the right areas, then there needs to be more focus on longer-term preventative work, such as early or family intervention and integrated offender management. This doesn't mean that we ignore the here and now, but we're going to have to find ways of doing both. And those who focus merely on achieving short-term successes have to understand this is unsustainable. And preventative work doesn't always cost huge amounts of money. We all know that's not an option anymore. Sometimes it just requires us to use our current resources differently. But my experience has shown that genuine joined-up working is much easier to do at a local level when it's supported and reflected at a national level too. And of course, policing cannot be looked at separately from the wider criminal justice system, which is also undergoing reform. Much of police bureaucracy is linked to file preparation, and whilst acknowledging that the proper collation and presentation of evidence is essential, I hope the electronic file systems will result in less bureaucracy for officers. I also welcome the proposed reforms that will speed up the court process and also reduce officer time at court. And the push for an increased use of officer discretion alongside a tighter framework for out-of-court disposals is music to my ears. For too long we have concentrated on targets rather than the victim. In fact, my vision for the wider criminal justice system is one that has the victim at its heart. Where victims are responded to swiftly by the police, are dealt with appropriately and offered support where this is needed. One where offenders are quickly identified and appropriately dealt with, taking into account the victim's wishes. In some cases, this may mean a restorative approach led by police officers, or maybe through a neighbourhood justice panel. However, persistent or serious offenders must be arrested and quickly put before the courts where they are dealt with swiftly and robustly. What is important is that the victim feels protected and sees justice being done. And my vision sitting alongside this victim-focused process will be the joined-up preventative work that I mentioned earlier, integrated offender management that will seek to prevent reoffending, family intervention that will ensure young people are brought up in an environment that offers them positive opportunities, rather than one that condemns them to a life of antisocial behaviour or crime. So in concluding, the reality is that no one really knows at this stage what the longer-term impact of the current police reform agenda will have on the police service, or indeed the public. But this is a time for the leaders of the service to demonstrate leadership in a way that instills confidence in both their staff and the public. We need to acknowledge the impact that such change is having on staff, many of whom are losing their jobs, with those left behind taking on greater responsibilities. But we must also seize the opportunity that this change presents, opportunities to do things differently, but still deliver a great service. We need to make better use of the growing evidence base for policing so that resources are deployed in ways that we know work best. And the service needs to develop a stronger culture of continuous improvement, where the sharing of good practice becomes the norm. But the leaders also need to be brave enough to take the decision to stop doing things that don't work or are no longer the responsibility of the service. But in terms of policing beyond this particular period of reform, what we do know is that there will still be a budget of £10.5 billion for the delivery of policing across England and Wales. There will still be 130,000 officers supported by support staff who will work hard to protect the public. Yes, it will be tough, and yes, it will be different. But our focus in creating the future of policing must remain on protecting the public. That means every citizen in England and Wales. Their families, their homes and communities must remain our primary concern. And our mission has always been and will continue to be steadfastly directed at delivering the most efficient, effective and best police service for our communities. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Irene. About 3 or 4 minutes for any questions. Otherwise, Irene's released to... Oh, I beg your pardon.
Hello. I applaud your call for discretion, but computerization involves bureaucracy, and bureaucracy denies discretion. Because the more computerized the police system is, the more the policemen are being reported on as well as the people they talk to. And so rather than take a risk, they will simply report everything. So discretion will become nigh on impossible. How are you going to cope with that?
I think the biggest problem with discretion is not the bureaucracy, but the culture. And I think the policing culture is very focused on ticking boxes. And that's developed over the last 10 years or so. And I think that's what we need to move away from. You don't need to measure discretion if you've got supervisors doing their job supervising.
No, but now the computer is ticking the boxes as well as the policeman.
But it's the people who are looking at what's on the computer that's the problem. You shouldn't be looking at how many arrests people make. You shouldn't be looking at how many stop searches they do. They should be understanding what that police officer is doing in that interaction rather than the actual...
I agree with you wholeheartedly, but should isn't what is going to happen.
Well, that's what we're appealing to our chief officers to try and achieve.
Thank you. One more from Mr. Gray.
Thank you. One thing that confuses me that you have a federation of police superintendents, association, and then you have the union of police constables.
Police federation, yeah.
And then we've got the association of police chief constables. Have we got a single police force? Are you joined up from top to bottom? And one other question, if I may. If you had a force with a 93% public satisfaction, which is top of the county list, but bottom of the county list for crime and detection, which one would you continue with?
In answer to the second question, I would much prefer to be in the 93% public satisfaction, because I think that's what really counts to the public, rather than crime figures. That's my personal view. In terms of how the service is structured, the Police Federation and the Police Superintendents Association are representative bodies that represent their members in terms of pay and conditions. We also get involved in discussion around national policy, etc., but our primary role is to represent our members. ACPO is not a representative body in that sense, the Association of Chief Police Officers. However, the new professional body that I mentioned will actually bring together all of the federated ranks from constable right through to chief constable and police staff in a body that will set the standards for policing for the future. So you will still have your representative bodies that do your pay negotiations, but actually the voice of the service, if you will, and I don't particularly like that term, but the future of the service will be determined through this police professional body, which will also have some independent representation on it. So that hopefully will clarify that landscape for people.